that you, when you're lying on your side, oops, when you're lying on your side, your hips are bent to 90, your knees are bent to 90, and the feet, well, you know, there's many possibilities. And you're sitting forwards at the front edge of your chair. And on your sit bones. Yeah. That's the next question. Are you sitting on your sit bones? Thank you, Danielle. So without touching, moving, notice whether you, if you think of that, you know, the roundy bit, where are you? Are you on the back somewhere, the front somewhere, or in this, on the high point, we could call it? Now, most people don't know where they are, and they assess their configuration of sitting from other factors going on in their spine, their lower back, perhaps, or their thoracic spine. So they might feel that they're forwards, so they project that onto the sit bones, but we have the capacity to tuck our pelvis and extend our spine. It never ceases to surprise me. So what I'd like you to do is lean forwards, put your hand, lift your pelvis, put your hands under yourself and sit on your sit bones. So you want to feel the ischium as squarely as you can on the fingers or in the palm of the hand. When you feel like they're in your hand, you may need to move a little bit to find them. Can you roll your pelvis forwards? So top of your back of the top of your pelvis comes forwards and backwards. And feel your sit bones moving over your hands, rolling over your hands. And explore that range so that you observe when you're coming up onto them and getting taller perhaps, when you're going over them, tipping over onto the front edge of them, or when you're going onto the back of them and folding, getting shorter, smaller. Can you breathe as you do that? So imagine you had eyes on your sit bones. Could you imagine where your eyes would be looking? The eyes on your sit bone? When you roll your pelvis forwards, feel how your eyes are turning backwards. When you roll your pelvis backwards, can you feel how your eyes are beginning to look forwards?
So when you tip right forwards, are you sitting on your pubic bone?
You may be. It depends on one's anatomy, one's organization. It is possible, but it would be pretty difficult, I think. Unless you had a rounded surface underneath you. Like you were sitting on a roller, then you probably could lean on your pubic bone. Bike seat. Thank you. Oh, yes. Anyone else notice that?
Yes, they're different shapes.
So we can have different shapes. We can have more weight on one side than the other, or lighter on one side than the other. One can be more forwards than the other, or more backwards than the other. Okay, it's rare that they're totally symmetrical. So which is surprising, given it's such a bony structure. Yeah? Deeper? Yes. And is that the one that you feel more pressure on? Yeah. Okay, please take your hands out and just notice how you're sitting now. Are you able to sense your sit bones any more clearly? Recognize, maybe you're sitting in a different position Or maybe you recognize where you are on your sit bones more clearly. Okay, could you shift your weight a little more to one side and then back to the middle? Do that several times, the same direction. Notice which sit bone you chose. Did it have any of the descriptors that Amanda was speaking? Is this the one that feels like it was more heavier or more deeper into the table or more forwards or backwards that you chose to move to first? Okay, come back to the middle. See what it's like to move onto your other sit bone. You feel like your pelvis suddenly gets heavier? Usually we'll choose the easier way first. But if both ways are difficult, then our nervous system makes a decision. It'll usually, again, go for whatever's easier out of the two without you even making the decision. Okay. Rest on your back for a moment. On the floor. So you can go. Bend your knees, stand your feet. Listen to where you place your feet. Was this the position where you felt like you could lift your pelvis most easily from a previous ATM last week? Or is it just where they landed? Roll your pelvis a little forwards and backwards. Just notice how that movement travels through you. How you feel the shape of your vertebral column changing a little bit. Adapting to the force that's being generated through the muscles of your pelvis and hip joints. And in this orientation, you've got choices you could make. You could, if I'd instructed you, lift your pelvis if your legs are in that stable standing position, ready to take weight, or rock your pelvis, roll your pelvis headward, footward. Okay, please leave that and come back to sitting. So each time, after a variation, and when you come back to the table, just get a sense of how comfortable your sitting is, what shape your back is making, and where you are relative to your sit bones, on your sit bones, and the organization of your legs. Could you cross your right leg over your left leg? Once your legs are crossed, could you shift your weight more onto your left ischium and then come back? And how can you, one, do it in a range where you don't fall, and two, organize your breathing? So the next question is, how do you do that? What shape does your spine make? as you move your weight towards your left ischium. So if you think of your head at one end of your spine, your pelvis at the other end of your spine, what's the shape of your spine between them? Shift your weight more like so your trunk is a solid piece. You shift your weight so that as your weight goes onto your left ischium, your head moves to the right, and your spine forms a concave on the right-hand side. Or do you go like a banana to the left? So these are the possibilities. Actually, it's probably easier. So you have, if you turn around here, so you've got your right leg crossed over your left. You could bring your weight onto this sit bone, leaning as a whole. You could shift your weight, creating this curve. Or something somewhere in between, where you're not keeping your spine like a stick, you're not creating so much side bending, but there's a sense of getting taller as you come over onto your sit bone. But your head still stays, so your head stays more vertical, but there's a sense, may even feel a bit like a diagonal movement. So can you try each of those ways? Starting to feel like I'm in a rock pool and there's all these sea anemones floating with the currents. It's a nice feeling, actually. It was a nice experience for me. Okay, please uncross your legs and shift your weight onto your left ischium again, and just see how it is to do that now. With something a little clearer, a little easier. Sometimes it feels just like there's less weight. But how you perceive a shift or a change will be very unique to you and your language and your experience. So the words I use are to prompt or to guide or direct your attention, but they're not what you should feel after you've, explored some variations. Okay, could you cross your left leg over your right leg now and explore moving your weight onto your right sit bone? First of all, just do it and find out how you do it spontaneously. If that makes any sense to you. There's a line of your spine translating in space, meaning moving in the same plane to the right. So it might be doing some of that, but also some side bending. Maybe you feel side bending, you may feel that one side of your ribs or one side of your torso gets longer and the other side gets shorter. And a folding in the ribs. And then try the 3 ways on this side. One like a tree, stick. One like a C curve. And one where you might feel that your sit bone gets heavier, but your head gets taller. Top of your head moves upwards in the direction of the ceiling. So can you do the one where your head, as the left side of your pelvis lifts, your head moves? That's the one. And still, that's it. Good. Okay, uncross your legs. Shift your weight left and right on your pelvis to see what that's like now. Now also roll your pelvis forwards and backwards. But clarified anything in how you shift your weight or roll your weight over your sit bones? Great. Okay, so you can rest in sitting, or you can take a rest on the floor. I remember giving a series of lessons to a policeman, and after about the 3rd lesson, he stood up off the table, and instead of walking sort of, tough guy style, which you can't see because you're lying down, but instead of walking tough guy style, all of a sudden he had this movement through where there was no movement through his torso. He had some twisting and some turning through his torso, and his pelvis was actually moving in very different directions in space. And, me being excited and wanting to know if he noticed that, said, how do you feel? What's that like for you to walk like that? And he said, I can't walk like this. They'd tell me I'm gay. And it really struck me how much, we talked about it some more, and there were other things going on, but it really struck me how our associations or beliefs and connecting certain ways of moving with certain attitudes or certain people. If you think of God. Well, let's not go to Tony Abbott. It could be a sensitive subject. I was going to say that, but thank you. Exactly. Does he need some lessons? But I don't know that there's any hope. The West Indians, the cricket teams, and you see them walking, and they're just sort of gliding, and their whole body is involved in their action. And they don't have any problem with their pelvis moving in every which direction, but there is there's often a predisposition to either the flexing, extending action of the pelvis or the rotating. We all have slight biases. We're going to look at that tomorrow a little bit more, I think, if I remember. It's on the list. And other people are more able to embrace those shifts.
The best sort of tough guy role model would be like Cassius Clay Mohammed Ali, when he's growing. Because he had real flexibility and movability.
Yeah.
With a grace of beauty, but
that's a good. No. I watched a dark movie the other day about. Forgotten. It escapes me right this second. But it was about a wrestler who was supported by one of the richest families in America. And it surprised me how this actor looked like he needed lessons. And yet, whether it was the same actor or not, another question, when he moved in the wrestling ring, it was amazing the power that he could create. So we can't necessarily link someone's organisation with better or worse. So what do they want to do with it? How does it serve them? And if it would serve them to have more choices because of it's creating stress and strain in their system, then maybe they have a little more willingness to go there. Please come back to sitting. It's going to bug me. The name of that movie, Dragon Star? Dragon Fox? Dragon Fox? Fox something. So notice how you're sitting now. Check in with the relationship and organisation of your legs. And could you put your hands on your hips? Hands on the top of your pelvis. The rim of your pelvis. Okay. And actually keep your fingers on your pelvis and put your thumbs on your ribs, or your whichever way is more comfortable for you. And slowly roll your pelvis forwards and backwards. So one finger's on the thumb on the ribs, fingers on the ASIS, and just feel how they come closer together as you round backwards. And how does that distance or relationship change as you roll your pelvis forwards? While you're sensing that, can you also sense the direction of the eyes on your sit bones? And then bring your hands to the back of you. Maybe it's going to be the heel of your hand on your lower ribs, the tips of your fingers on the top of your pelvis, and roll your pelvis forwards and backwards. You sense, well, Yona was saying that she had been doing this. And you can feel how useful it can be. Sometimes when words fail us and we're guiding someone else to do something, then to get them to put their hands there, or if it's obvious that it's not clear, getting someone to put their hands there and feel the sensations of movement can make a huge difference. Okay, try hands on the sides and moving your pelvis left and right. So lifting one sit bone, so to move your pelvis so that your left and right could be a bit misleading. So that you lift one sit bone away, feel what happens between the ribs and the pelvis on that side. So if you're moving like a stick, that relationship will stay the same. Now if you're making a C curve, it's likely that if you're moving onto your left sit bone, the ribs and side of your pelvis will be coming closer together on the right side and getting further apart on the left. That's good. Okay. Could you begin to move your weight onto your left sit bone with your hands there? Roll your pelvis forwards, shift your weight onto your right sit bone, roll your pelvis backwards, so you begin to move your pelvis in a circular fashion around the table. And because it doesn't need to be a big movement, those of you who are on the tables can be mindful of your neighbours. Although if you're sensing through your back, meeting your neighbour's back can be just part of the experience. Feel, when does your head come forwards? And when does your head get more erect and taller? Okay. Please leave that and take a rest on your back. Notice how you're lying, how your pelvis is contacting the floor. Just put the soles of your feet together. Knees hanging open to the side. See what it's like now to roll your pelvis a little forwards and a little backwards. And to move your pelvis right and left so that one knee lowers down towards the floor, one thigh, then the other. Just notice, is that any different after what you've been exploring so far? What's happening in the ribs? On the other side, your waist. Okay, leave it. Pause a moment. And then return to your seat, upright seat. So could you bring your right hand over the top of your head to hold on to your left temple, somewhere near your left ear. Begin to move your weight onto your left side of your pelvis, your left sit bone, and come back. And as you do that, direct your right elbow with your head in the direction of the right side of your pelvis. And then come back to the middle. Notice what you feel through your ribs, your upper ribs. On the left side, the right side. Does the line of your spine change in a continuous curve? Or is there somewhere where there's more of an angle? It's almost like you're creating a bend there. Sharper bend. Try the same thing with your right leg crossed over your left leg. So you're shifting your weight to your left sit bone as you lift the right side of your pelvis. Maybe you sense the left side of your pelvis, left ischium, pressing into the table a little more. Okay, rest in sitting. You feel more on your sit bones or less on your sit bones? More upright, less upright. Bring your other hand over the top of your head. So really take it over the top of your head so that your face, as much as possible, can stay looking forwards. Begin to lift your right, no, it is left side of your pelvis. As you move your left elbow in the direction of your hip joint. So you're lifting this side, and bring your elbow this way. That's it. Just the same side, always. So you're moving your weight onto your right sit bone. That's it. That's it. Feeling what's happening on the ribs on either side of your spine at the back. What's your sternum doing? Do you feel that changes its orientation or relationship to the floor? Relationship to your spine? Cross your left leg over your right leg and continue. So you're shifting your weight onto your right ischium. Feel, how does your right ischium receive the weight? At the moment you feel your right ischium getting heavier on the table. Well, what's happening upward through yourself? And is that transition smooth? Or does it have some jerkiness or pauses in it? And put your hand on your sternum. Once you feel comfortable and familiar, so you leave your hand on your head, put the other hand on your sternum. Now you sense any change in relationship of your sternum to yourself? Try different places on your sternum, different pairs of ribs on either side of your sternum. And then uncross your leg, take your hand off your head, continue to sense your sternum. So make it easier for yourself. Yeah, I can do it just, yeah, but spread that out now. Yeah, and now do it. Do what? Well, this is off, and you're shifting, so this is off now. Yeah, feel your sternum when you shift your weight onto that. Maybe you want to put two hands either side of your sternum on those ribs. Or your hands on the ribs at the side of yourself, as some are doing. And then how able are you to listen to yourself? Like, what's the listening quality of your own hands on yourself? Are your hands following, sensing, listening, or directing? What's happening at those uppermost joints but underneath your skull, those upper two vertebrae that actually can move independently? Do you feel some movement of your head on your upper vertebra as you're doing this? And it could be that you sense it in the timing, like it happens after something else or a sequence. Could be that there's some lateral movement of the base of your skull at the beginning of the movement. So as much as you can, keep your spine yourself vertical. And if you round backwards when you're exploring this side bending, that really changes the possibilities of what can happen through your spine. Okay. Rest in sitting or on the floor, whichever you feel you need. So over the years, I've seen a lot of people, clients come to my practice who would like to be able to meditate in sitting comfortably for longer. How do you think we might, what would that person need to know about organisation of the spine where they could organise themselves for the weight, body weight, to pass down through the centre of the spine with less work? So that the small muscles on either side of the spine create the integrity of the spine, but they're not holding the segments up or from tipping off balance, but just allow forces to pass upwards and downwards. One of the things that I would explore with them is all these different patterns of movement of the spine and of their spine, and how whether the movement is equally distributed through the spine. So each part of the spine doing what it's capable of doing. And that they get a sense of, like the lessons you've been doing, being able to move themselves from their pelvis over the floor, so that instead of having a small base where they're holding their stability in a really rigid way, they get the degrees of freedom which allows them to move through space in a larger field, so there is a possibility of finding a more comfortable, neutral and alignment in sitting to rest into. But to begin with, when you're learning to unravel some of those patterns of holding your back and orientations of being upright or eager to work, or, oh, I don't want to do this work anymore, or whatever it is, because a lot of our sitting has underlying attitudes that express themselves in our posture. To begin with, it can feel more exhausting temporarily for some. One, because your nervous system may be feeling the work that you usually do, and all of a sudden it becomes intolerable because it's being perceived. And the other is because while you're slowly reorganizing one part of your spine, maybe other parts take a little longer to catch up. So everything's not quite congruent to begin with. Please come back up to sitting. I think it was Priscilla saying she felt the movement of a sacroiliac dance. Was it you that I heard say that? You felt something you thought you might have perceived? Okay, so we're going to listen for that now. So take a seat. I was just delighted that you can help yourself by either putting your fingers on your iliac crest or putting your fingers on your sit bones. But if you... why did I put that down? Oh, it doesn't matter. Think that you're going to roll your pelvis forwards and backward and just listen. Do you feel any separation, increasing distance between the crests, ASISs at the front here, and any changing relationship between your sit bones at the back? So there's several possibilities. So I'll say them and you can just see if they make sense to you. As you roll your pelvis forwards and you sending the eyes of your sit bones backwards, do you have any sense of your sit bones getting a little further apart, distancing from one another? And the front of your pelvis coming a little together. As you roll your pelvis backwards, think of your sit bones coming together towards one another and the bones of the ilium separating a little. So you could feel that may be able to feel it at your ASIS at the front. You may be able to feel it with your sit bones relative to the table. You're rolling your pelvis forwards and backwards. But there's another movement that can happen within that, which is this nutating is the word that's used in medical language, where the ilium rotates and glides on the sacrum. And as a consequence of that, the sit bones can separate a little, move away from one another and towards one another. So instead of thinking of rolling your pelvis forwards and backwards, think of it as leading from your sit bones. Think as you round your pelvis backwards, your sit bones are coming together, forwards. And then as you roll your pelvis forwards, thank you, your sit bones, the eyes of your sit bones are getting a bit of stigmus and looking upwards. Some people, you may not feel it. Others may feel it relative to sit bones and not here. Others might feel it here and not there. But it's something that you can start playing with when you know it's a possibility. But when joints have not been used for a long time and the ligaments and structures have shrunk, it does take time to change it. Not with everybody. Some people like that. But changing the structure of the tissues requires a change in the way you use yourself over time. Okay, so now let that go and just roll your pelvis forwards and backwards. Have any sense of as you roll forwards, you get taller? As you roll backwards, you get shorter? So it's not leaning backwards. So roll the top of your pelvis backwards, top of your pelvis, top of your pelvis. This is the top. This is the highest part of your pelvis. So take that backwards, backwards, backwards. So take it backwards. Yeah, and let your head come down. And as you roll it forwards, you get taller. You were kind of doing a pivoting in here. That's that. And see if you can track in your mind's eye your sit bones and the direction they're heading in. Is your head free? Could you look around and still do the same movement? Might change at the end of rolling backwards or at the end of being upwards, because then you start to change the biomechanics of what's going on a little bit. Okay. Next time you come onto your sit bones, looking for that place where you're not forwards or backwards, but that you're balancing on that highest point where it's easy to move forwards, sideways, backwards. Can you move your weight left and right? Move yourself so you lean more on one sit bone, more on the other. Great. And then bring yourself up to standing. Scan yourself in standing, how you feel the weight through your feet. See what it's like to move your pelvis in standing. A little bit left, a little bit right, a little forwards, backwards. And then walk around. Can be. So a question was asked, is there an age difference about how the sacroiliac joints move? And there can be, but you can get older people who have really that small movement easily available, and others that wouldn't have seen it for 100 years. So enjoy sensing yourself, your image of your pelvis as you take yourself wherever you take yourself now. And we'll see you back at 9:30 in the morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.